You're listening to the Kilcullen Diary Podcasts, stories in sound from a village grown bigger. Hello, I'm Byrne, and this is Kilcullen Diary. When the Book of Kildare was recently published as part of the celebrations for Brigid 1500, it marked the end of 5 years of work by Josephine Hardiman. A professional artist and calligrapher for some 35 years, brought up in County Kildare, the project came out of her interest in the folklore and history of the county. Art is in her family. Her brother Noel Scullion from Kilcullen is a nationally recognised sculptor and artist, retired as an art teacher in the town's Cross and Passion College. When I sat down recently with Josephine at her studio near Naas, I asked her where the artistic interest had come from.
I think it was always in the family. My dad worked with his hands. He was a blacksmith by profession, but he could do anything and make anything. He had a great mind for designing and for drawing. He worked in the cavalry workshops in the Curragh, and before that he worked up in Shorts of Larne near Belfast, making parts for the aircraft section of Shorts, and he joined the army during the emergency and met my mother. They got married. She was from Dublin, moved back up to County Antrim, where he was from, the Glens of Antrim, and he was working up there, but a job came up in the cavalry workshops where he'd been during the emergency, and he liked the Curragh and he liked Newbridge, and he had made friends, and he decided he'd move down because they were moving to Liverpool, and he was going to get a promotion, but he didn't want to go. But he was the kind of man that if your catch broke on your school bag, he'd bring it into his workshop the next day, and not only would you have a new catch, but you'd have 2 new catches that would last forever. You know, the little things like that he just was expert at doing. And he could sit down and draw and design. He used to do beautiful wrought iron work, and he would have got awards even for his work in during the 1945, the military tattoo in the Curragh. He designed, like fenders and what else would you call them, for fireplaces, and he would have entered them in competitions, and he always won the top prize. But he also designed the gates and the railings for the memorial to the men who were killed in the Congo that was unveiled, I can't remember what year, but it was in the 60s. And I'd say I would never have seen him sitting and drawing and painting, but his creativity, he always had a shed or workplace where he made things. And I mean anything, literally. I remember when I did metalwork in the art college, it was one of the first subjects I took, which was interesting because that was his love. And then I did calligraphy as well. My mother had beautiful handwriting, and I'll speak about her in a minute. But I did metalwork, and he brought me home this beautiful box one evening from his workshop that he probably would have had time in the evenings before his lift was ready to come home to Newbridge. And he brought me home this beautiful wooden box, that was, I think I had it for years, with all the compartments for all the little tools that I used. And that's the kind of person he was. My mother had great, beautiful handwriting. She often said she wished she had done calligraphy, but later years she got Parkinson's and was in a nursing home for a long time before she died. But she used to always have something on the go, like a lot of women in those days. She had her knitting machine where she used to knit on that. I remember the old-fashioned knitting machine with all the little needles on it. But the one thing she perfected was her Aran knitting, and she used to knit for Shannon. And they always said she was their best knitter. But she would start an Aran pattern, and she'd do the rib and then maybe about an inch of it. And then she wouldn't have to look at it again. She wouldn't have to follow a pattern. She also, when we were younger, like a lot of mothers, as I said, and a lot of women, she used to do what they call turncoats. I don't know if you ever heard of that. It was, say she had a coat, and it was lining inside it. You'd cut that up, take out the lining, and the inside of the coat would be perfect. And she'd make coats for us, and they would be perfect. She would have lived in Dublin, born and raised in Dublin. Her parents were from Baltinglass, but she went to Rathmines Tech at night when she was about 16 or 17 and educated herself in a lot of things she loved. And that was one thing she did. She did applique and she did dressmaking and that. And she could have kind of made anything. She'd nearly work without a pattern. She'd design her own stuff.
Clearly, Josephine and her siblings grew up in an ethos that both inspired and encouraged art. She remembers that showing artistic talents had other uses too.
We were allowed to do it all the time. It was almost like they had an innate sense of its worth, because I remember if my mother saw a painting, we'd one table, like in the sitting room, if it was your turn to wash or dry the dishes, you were exempt from it. It was definitely in her family, because we discovered in later years when we began to meet more of the families up north and more of the families in Dublin, a lot of them were involved in the arts in some way or other. A lot of them had their own work on the walls or had their own workshop between making. I have one cousin in the north who makes beautiful, the shepherd hook, the sticks, there's a name on the crook, yeah, and carves the top of them to suit people, whatever dog or animal, whatever head they want. And then I would have even seen people up north with calligraphy on the walls that I didn't know they were doing it. They were cousins, And then my mother's side, I know they were always winning art competitions. But, she was very creative. And one thing she used to say that always stuck in my mind, she went to school in Bagot Street. And she said her father used to have to come looking for her when she wouldn't arrive home, and where she would be in the National Gallery.
If you have an artistic bent, it was nurtured, obviously.
Yeah. And when I think back as well, like for Christmas from Santa Claus, you always got creative things like paints and brushes, but we always wanted them too. And then my eldest sister, Anita, who actually taught in Kilcullen for 2 years when she trained first, she was a great mentor to us younger ones, because there were 4 of us. But she could draw or paint anything as well. She went into primary school teaching, ended up doing special education, and then worked as a lecturer in St. Patrick's Training College in the art department there, art and English.
When she was just 19, Josephine had qualified as a teacher via Trinity College Dublin and Carysfort College, and took up a post back where she'd been to school herself, St. Conduit's Primary School in Newbridge. She was to remain there for 17 years and loved teaching, especially the infants whom she says absorbed knowledge like sponges.
I remember when I started it, I kind of, like a lot of teachers, and I wonder, will I ever make a teacher? Will I be good enough? All the doubts and whatever. But you find your own way in it. You find your own way within the first year, of you learning how children learn, which was so important, and as well as that, your own rhythm in your classroom per day. And as I said, junior infants were just so wonderful to teach, because you were the first break from the mother back then in the early 70s. So you were not just teacher, you were mother and nurse and everything. And teaching came in between everything else, because there was that much going on in a class of 51 junior infants. It was nearly impossible to get some of the lessons done. But anyway, I always enjoyed it, and it was very rewarding, I must say. The art came in so handy, that I could draw always on the blackboard, and it was a great way of sort of having complete silence in one way and complete stillness, because they were waiting. If you remember around those years, Don Conroy was very, very popular on television. Well, I suppose I really admired him. In fact, we invited him to the school a couple of times. And as I said, I really enjoyed teaching infants. A hard job. I wouldn't remember the journey coming home from Naas or Newbridge. You'd be so worn out, You'd be wrung out because you don't get a second to yourself nearly, And in those days, I think the year I got married in 1979, I had 51 junior infants in the class.
But there was much more to Josephine's art than being a handy way to keep little children quiet in class. Through those years it was tugging away at her creative mind, making itself ever more felt. Eventually, inevitably, she came to a decision.
And then in '89 I decided, I was kind of mid-30s, and I decided, no, I really want to do more in the art. And my three children at that stage, my three lovely daughters, Claire, Elaine and Denise, had all started primary school, and I thought, I'd give this a go. I won't take a career break, because I knew I was certain about what I wanted to do. And I knew I still had my qualification that would stand to me. And if I had to, I could go back. But in the meantime, I felt I could just earn enough bread and butter money to have the same income almost as I did with what I was left with in teaching, after tax and everything. And I did for a number of years. And I did that. And I suppose I'd spend maybe 3 days a week doing commissions, and the other 2 days maybe doing classes, or I might be asked to go somewhere and do workshops or whatever.
All through her teaching years, and after she'd got married, Josephine had made a point of going to art college 1 night a week. She says she just loved being there, that the atmosphere and the creativity energised her, almost like a meditation. She recalls even doing pottery classes for a few years, simply for the love of it.
But yeah, art is something it's your life. It's your lifestyle. Like, you live it all the time. It's a way of being. Like, it kind of almost as if it chooses you rather than you choosing it. Like a lot of vocations and walks of life, that you're hungry for it nearly. I often say I don't have to be motivated to start. I have to be motivated to stop and eat and drink.
Throughout her art studies, Josephine had become particularly interested in calligraphy, or artistic writing. Even while pursuing other disciplines, she continued perfecting her skills in this area. I asked her where had that particular interest come from.
A really important part of it was I'm a lover of poetry, and I read a lot of poetry and collect poetry books. And I always, even in secondary school, when the teacher was going off on a tangent about a poem, I'd go with her. I just loved the written word, and always felt a connection to, in particular, poetry. And then on my poetry books in school, I would draw around the poems, and I would have illustrations. And I was always experimenting with letters. Letters always fascinated me as well. And like the hieroglyphics and how it changed into the Roman lettering and how writing evolved. And then in particular, I would have been, like yourself, of the generation that when we started school, you wrote in the old Irish script. And I loved that. I always loved that as well, the old A's and the old D's. But then, like, there are 4 basic hands in calligraphy: the round hand, some people call it a Celtic hand, but it's really uncial, that lots of, say, the manuscripts were done in different versions of that. The Gothic, which would be the Middle Ages, and then the Italic, which was sort of the Renaissance, where they began to use lettering with more flourishes. And I loved them all. I love each hand. And calligraphy all of it would be based on the round hand or the Roman hand at the beginning of lettering or writing. But that was probably part of it, loving the written word and loving poetry and having a passion for it.
From her calligraphy, an increasing part of Josephine's portfolio of commissions became standalone framed art pieces of quotations and passages from poems or prose, with appropriate illustrations and illuminations. But for her, it's never just a case of scribing out the desired lines and adding a drawing or painted piece.
When I take a piece of calligraphy, if I'm asked, say, to do a particular poem as a gift for somebody, or even words from a song or words from a writer, I have to go into the visual feeling and the visual sense of it to choose, say, a background, the colours, maybe the style, and incorporate that into the poem, almost like an atmosphere for it. Sometimes a very clear illustration, but other times more abstract. Now, the work I did for the Book of Kildare would be the really skilled version of it, but the creativity part was probably the drawings and the illustrations. And then the illuminated letters, I found that were the more creative part of it than the skilled calligraphy, but yet that is skill and creativity as well, or skill and art. But I suppose I found when I started the illumination pages that my creativity was flowing a bit. It wasn't as disciplined, say, or as hard as doing the calligraphy pages, even though I ended up spending probably more time on the illuminated pages nearly than the calligraphy pages, because I would leave them aside and go back to them and, and wait for more inspiration, and maybe have three. I would work at three. I'd have three on the easel at the same time. I would work at three almost together, I did that with the calligraphy pieces as well. I was inclined to work in triptychs. And so, yeah, that was really important. And I suppose I see art, music and poetry are my three passions. And I see that in nature, and I see it all around me, and I feel it as well. And I suppose in a sense, like sometimes a person might say, why would you paint a beach when you can go and see it? And it's like as if I want to be part of it when I paint it, or I want to honour it. And even though I know some of my work would be paintings of actual landscapes that I would do from real life or from my own photographs, I still get lost in the blues when I'm painting the seas and the blues and the mountains. And I go into some part of my brain that's probably the creative part that taps into that little part, the memory of the feeling and of the sense of the place and the smells and the touch and I suppose the senses really. The disciplined part would be the calligraphy, but what I really love doing is doing backgrounds freehand with watercolours to get that feeling, to let the colours bring out almost an emotion in the background and the sense of what I feel about the poem.
The Book of Kildare project came about when Josephine was asked to take part in a festival in Kildare, which included aspects of the town and county's saint, Brigid. It was, unforeseen by her, to lead to something that would take over years of her artistic life.
I was asked during 2016 to come to the medieval festival in Kildare town to be the scribe in the cathedral, in St. Brigid's Cathedral, doing a piece from the Book of Lismore based on the life of Brigid. And I started the piece before I actually went to the cathedral because it was quite a long piece and I was given pages and pages of the translation of the life of Brigid by a man called Kevin Kelly. And I prepared it and did most of the calligraphy work because I knew if I was going to be sitting as a scribe, illuminating and writing, I could easily make mistakes with people coming around me. So I left the illumination parts of it, 4 little emblems at the corners of it, the cross, the flame, the oak and the well, to do on the day. And I was dressed as, it could have been Brigid or a scribe or an abbess or whatever.
Josephine put up a sign, the Book of Kildare, near the door of the cathedral, pointing to where she was working. The suggestion being that she was a scribe working on the fabled long-lost book. The piece she completed was then hung in Kildare Heritage Centre, and that might have been the end of it. But an artistic itch had been scratched, and a conversation ensued with Tom McCutcheon of the Heritage Centre.
We got talking about the Book of Kildare again, and he said, wouldn't it be wonderful to have one big, huge piece, based on maybe Brigid's cloak and all the stories. And I it would. I said, Tom, yeah, it should be great. And I came home and I said, I can't do that. I have to do the Book of Kildare, and I have to do the stories of Brigid as the Book of Kildare in a new form, in a modern form, but in an old style. And that's where it started. And I started with the woman, the goddess, the woman and the saint. And thinking I'll probably spend about 2 years at this. But as it grew and as the inspiration became more and more, I very much knew when I started it that I was meant to do it. And because all my life I've always felt I needed to and I wanted to do a book in calligraphy. I have half a book in calligraphy in there of Irish poets and illustrations that I might get back to at some stage. But then I worked in threes, as I said, the cross, the flame, the oak, the church, the well and the curragh. And those first 10 pages were then exhibited in 2017 in the Heritage Centre. They had that exhibition space upstairs. So then as it grew, every kind of maybe 8 or 10 or sometimes more, 12 pages I would get done, mainly working on them in the winter like a hermit. And it was a lovely thing to work on, because other than that I had to keep a little bit of income coming in, because this was being done totally my own choice. And I would research a lot, even though the page would turn out quite short, because I decided I would do each page as a standalone piece, because how was I going to afford to do this and maybe do 70 pages and spend what I thought was going to be only 2 years and have it, have a little bit of money coming in. So I did, I got prints done of each page, because I thought, well, the individual stories might sell, the cross, the well, the goddess, the saint. And they did, and I did cards. They sold enough to keep things ticking over, and they were popular enough, which also probably inspired me more and helped me to feel, yes, this is the right. Well, I don't think I would have stopped it unless I dropped dead, because I had promised myself that I was going to finish it.
With the arrival of COVID, Josephine put the project aside. Like very many people in the country, she felt she didn't know what was going to happen. As she says it, she put her creativity into her garden with its flowers and birds for the duration. But when she returned to the Book of Kildare eventually, it was with a renewed sense of purpose. She sought and got a number of grants through Creative Ireland. These allowed her to recruit help with social media and also manage the costs of setting up exhibitions. The arrival of the Brigid 1500 programme brought a grant which would help significantly towards the actual printing costs of the book.
Throughout the years of doing each page, I got them imaged and got prints done of them. That was quite expensive, but because it was an ongoing thing, it didn't, and because I was doing the prints, I'd say it covered itself. And so that's one of the reasons I didn't go to a publisher. It would have taken nearly too long, and I would have nearly have had to have the book totally finished to present it to a publisher. Whereas I was doing the last page of it last November. So, because I couldn't stop, and I wanted it as correct for my goals as I could, or from so it grew, and it also then, when it was also becoming nearer the finishing of the book last year, I needed to divide it into sections and do extra pages as well. And then the coming together of the graphic work in the beginning of the story of it, and all of that we knew nothing about, so it was a great learning process,
Over the years of working on the Book of Kildare, Josephine carried out an extraordinary amount of research, mostly about Brigid at first, but later on the other folklore elements. She had decided from the beginning that each story should only take 1 page in calligraphy and illustration, so she had to distill the information she gathered into a space where every word counted. The result is very pure storytelling.
I wanted it that it would tell a story to, say, a 10-year-old child, or an art student, or an adult, or a book to read, or a coffee table book, or a book to learn more about Kildare and Brigid. And I didn't know if I was getting there. And I've got great feedback from different people and different walks of life, like the people who are followers of Brigid, absolutely. love it. And then the people, the historians, the local history groups, and then like worldwide, even Americans and Australia. Quite a lot of books have gone to Australia already, and America. And I think the fact that I did it in that old Irish style as well, the old on Clog Gaelic, I think it's called, with the old D's and the old G's and the old T's, but you still had that to be legible for children. So as I was going through it, I would ask them, mostly my grandchildren, or children where I did workshops, and they would be able to read it, which was great. And people from other countries, from Lithuania and all the different different nationalities we have living here, because I had a Polish guy and a Spanish girl living in the apartment for a while, but they were able to read that no bother as well.
Adding in the fables and folklore of Ireland before Brigid was important to the project. It was to round the story, possibly in a way that the lost original Book of Kildare may not have done.
Well, the Book of Kildare, first of all, would have been the Gospels in Latin, if the Book of Kildare ever existed, or if it was ever found, or if it was the Book of Kells or one of the others. But you never know, maybe found in an old European library somewhere, the way they often discover books that are hidden for years. But I think that was important to me to do before Christianity, as well as a little bit about Kildare after it as well too, because to me all of that led into the stories of Brigid, and to honour our ancient Celtic heritage. I know Celtic is a word that can be used in lots of different ways, but it was like what our ancestors honoured, and how it changed into Christianity, and Christianity borrowed from it, and to make it a storybook from back where those ancient solar festivals had influenced Christianity, and everything about Christianity that came from the solar festivals, because they always fascinated me as well, and the way our ancestors were in touch with the earth, like the indigenous Native Americans. I've always been interested in their culture and read a lot about that, and just absolutely love their poetry and their writing. And it sort of needed a beginning, a middle, and an end, I felt. And as also, I think because the Book of Kildare wouldn't have been about Brigid, needless to say. It would have been maybe around the 6th, 7th, 8th century, it might have been written, but there probably might have been a book written with her in it, but I doubt it. The Book of Kildare would have been the Gospels, more than likely.
Josephine doesn't believe in the phrase writer's block. She just reckons that from time to time a writer goes in another direction. There was one instance, though, in her Book of Kildare journey, that she did come to a stop. It was halfway through one of the stories.
I started The Peacemaker, and I did the illustration of Brigid with the dove, and about her leadership qualities and her bringing peace, and her legacy spreading across Europe, and men and women equally respected in her monastery. And I stopped there, and that actually was left alone for over a year, because I could not come up with the rest of it. And I had loads of research done and loads of ideas for it, and every time I sketched it out or just wrote the words or decided what I was putting in, no, it wasn't right. So it was actually left aside for a year. And then it was announced that Brigid's Day was going to be a national holiday. Brigid's strong and gentle spirit is being honoured in Ireland as a national holiday from the year 2023, and Brigid 1500, the year 2024, the anniversary of her death, will be
commemorate. Her life of love, generosity, promoting peace and human rights and care for the earth would be celebrated globally. Like that happened when...
So the reason, in fact, when you said it was meant to be, was that you couldn't finish that page because the story hadn't happened yet.
Yeah, it was intuitive that it couldn't be finished. The minute I heard it, oh, that's the rest of that page. Yeah, you know.
The Book of Kildare is finished. It has been accepted to such a degree that Josephine has already ordered another printing. When she finally got to the end, did she know she had finished it?
You'd never be 100% happy. No artist would be. Like, I see lots of things I might have changed and could have done differently. But I'm pleased with my work. And I'm happy that it's done. And sometimes I look at it and I say, gosh, did I actually do that? You know, when I look through the pages, when I look through the work. But because it was done over such a long period, and I suppose I had, in a sense, the freedom to take the time over doing each page and maybe be concentrated on that and 2 other pages beside it. Like, for instance, those illuminated letters, the L for Lunasa. Like, I did that during the month of August. I did that during the month of August, a different year. You know, so, and actually those 2 pages were done totally in Kildare Library, where I worked quite a bit because I felt it had to be done in Kildare town, in situ. And that page, The Peacemaker, was done mainly in Kildare Library as well. This part I probably would have done more at home, because I remember a summer night working on that.
And now, is there life after the Book of Kildare? Is there another project?
Yeah, I would be thinking of the next thing, but I'm restraining myself to want to just get back to painting watercolours or do pastels for maybe a year or so. And I haven't got any major project in mind. I feel that that is a sense of achievement. A lot of people ask me, was I excited when it was finished? I said, no, I wasn't excited. I was overwhelmed that people actually liked it or bought it. But as that went on, I got probably more excited about it. And the reason that I couldn't be excited about it, I think, was I was actually worn out with it. And also that it's what I do anyway. It was just, it's all in a book form. You know, that I suppose all my commissions and all my work over the years have led to it. And all my interests. And to honour Kildare. And a book for Kildare, felt Kildare has to have it.
That was Josephine Hardiman, artist, calligrapher and creator of the Book of Kildare. I'm Byrne. This is Kilcullen Diary. Thank you for listening.